Hello, and bienvenidos to this episode of Voces, the official Hola at IBM podcast that brings our Hispanic and Latino communities of IBM together to share authentic, accessible, and informal conversations, amplifying critical leadership messages on culture, career, well-being, business, and technology. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of IBM.
All right. Well, welcome to the 8th episode of Voces. I will be your host, Marco Lianos. I'm an IT senior strategy consultant for IBM under the Talent Transformation Consulting Division. I'm also a DEI champion, co-founder, and lead the DC region's Familia or Hispanic BRG. And here at Voces, we're here to amplify Latin voices, and we are honored and proud to have here as our guest, Stacie de Armas. She is Senior Vice President of DEI, Diverse Insights and Intelligence and Initiatives. Quite the title there. We're happy to have her from the Nielsen company. Welcome, Stacie.
Thank you so much, Marco. Hola a todos. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's just dive in. We first want to start a little bit about yourself, get some background of your story. So tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your origin stories, or anything you want to share to just give us a snippet about you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So my name is Stacie de Armas. I am a Cubana. I live in Los Angeles. I am first generation. I am a mother, and I have 2 children. I have one that just started college, and I have one that is soon on her way, a 17-year-old. I have spent, so that's who I am. Professionally, I have a job, and I'll talk about that. I think it's really important for us to think about who we are, our responsibilities to ourselves and our families, and then, of course, what we do, which oftentimes supports our families and our community. But it is important to a distinction, I think, who we are and what we do. I have the great privilege and pleasure of working for Nielsen. Nielsen is often known for its television research, although we do a lot more than that. We are a technology company measuring entertainment and media. And my job specifically at Nielsen has to do with taking the values of DE&I, which oftentimes when we think about DEI and we talk about them, we're thinking about them in terms of hiring practices or developing culture or ensuring that we have, diverse slates and that we are, retaining and recruiting the right types of talent for different types of work and within an organization. That is critically important, and that's the group that I sit within. But my responsibility is taking those values and applying them to the business side of the business, Marco. So making sure that those same values are present within how we collect data, how we report data, what our clients want to learn about audiences when it comes to diversity and inclusion metrics, and how we can connect those to ROIs, to outcomes, so we can understand if inclusion and diversity as it relates to media and entertainment data has a positive outcome for brands and agencies and others that are looking to better understand people and what they're watching and content.
Wow, that's very powerful. Not only from the personal side that you brought up, it's powerful being a parent, and congratulations, similar to me, that you made kind of a milestone of one of your children making it to college, or that high school graduation process, and then you're still in high school. So that's awesome and powerful. That equally and a big part of what you do is just helping the Latinx community. So I find it fascinating what you do to develop the insights and make a huge difference. And honestly, that's why we're here, is to amplify who you are and what you do. And we're just excited to keep diving in here.
You know, what's
Uh,
interesting, if I could just add, Marco, what's really interesting
sure.
is a lot of what I do is informed by my kids and my family. And I think, you know, before we started recording, you and I were chatting about your kids, right? And I think it is important, as I said early, like who I am and what I do. But we also recognize, and maybe, you know, in particular Latinos, perhaps not all, but for many of us, you know, we blend those worlds together a lot. And a lot of the work that I do, I see as a benefit to my community, my family. And so I bring those together, which is why I love doing what I do, right? Insights, not only about Latinos, I do it about I tell stories about a lot of diverse communities and the value of diverse communities, inclusion, audiences, content. But I do that more than because it's my responsibility at Nielsen. I do that also because I've directly seen the benefits it offers, you know, our community. And I hope I have a chance to talk a little bit about more about that as we move forward. I think I will.
Yeah, definitely. I think you just layered in one of the things that you do and your and that research that you had mentioned, and through your family developing insights, there's and again, not all Latin families, but I think in general, a lot of the insights that that you that you mentioned in the past, and this is just me hearing some of your stories or podcast pre-COVID,
Mhm.
with the connection of the Latin community, is that we're layered, and because in general we're a very tight knit family, and it's a multi generational aspect or opportunity of learning from a uh, older generation, viviendo con los abuelos, or at least staying very close with them, to the parents, to the grandkids, and to the children. All of that layer gives us a great opportunity to learn from each other. So just building off of what you said on how important family is, and getting those insights along with the data that gives you some outcome to make decisions, or at least generate those reports. So that's awesome. Um, so we did have a specific question of the Latinx community, uh, about your work and the buying power of the Latinx community, which is impressive, and it's estimated around almost $2 trillion, which is, if you think about, in the grand scheme of things, it's just why you do what you do is so important and impactful to the community. How are these metrics in your latest Nielsen report useful for a brand's decision making and connecting with our community authentically?
One of the important things that I do when I talk about the community and I talk about the impact is I always want to contextualize it with data. So you mentioned the buying power, around 2.8 trillion actually now,
Oh,
and if you
wow.
look at the GDP, which is a bit of a different measure than consumer buying power, you've heard a lot of research around, and LDC, I have to give credit where credit is due. Latino Donor Collaborative does this work telling us that the Latino GDP, if it was its own country in the US, would be, among uh, the largest in the world. I think they say the fifth largest, but it sort of varies, right? Five, six, seven. It moves around a little bit depending on what's happening. But the point is, it would be, one of the largest in the world. I think it's important to use some of this data to contextualize the strength of the community. So we talked about buying power. I think we often, when we talk about the community too, we'll say, well, Latinos represent about 20% of the population of the US. And even that, you feel like, well, what does that really mean in numbers? And then when you say, well, we're talking about, 60 plus million, and we're talking about the majority of the population being, under the age of 34, with 58% under the age of 34, it gives you more context. Like, okay, so this is, a growing community, but also a very young and powerful community. And when communities are young, they are really leading the way for, culture and change, right? If you have 58% of our community under the age of 34, think not only about the impact that the community can have on the country, but on our own community. You have this, huge cohort among Latinos in the US, this huge cohort under 34, everybody else over 34, right? And that's certainly not the middle, 34 is not the middle of age where you're like, well, half are over, half are under. No, the under 34 and with another 30+%, 34% or so under the age of 18. So you have these like drivers of change and culture, not only in the country, but within our own community, right? Helping change some of the things that have plagued our community, things like colorism, this, almost like a sort of like a caste system that exists around language usage. Like we have some, within our community, we have some dark history, the way we've treated our own in many cases. I mentioned colorism. And so what a benefit we have to have this huge young cohort of people that are helping not only change, society, change American culture, but changing culture within our community as well. So to answer the question, and I'm not sure if I did answer it, I feel like I kind of went off, but I feel like it's important for us to think about how data can help contextualize a story. We know that, I think, inherently, but when we talk about the Latino community, we sometimes put these stats out there and we sit with them so often that we forget the power and what it actually means.
Yeah, and you did answer the question in the sense that it's identifying and it's identifying not just the buying power and the empowering of the community, but it's really focused, or at least the numbers are staggering for kind of twofold is my reaction of what you just said. One is from companies' points of views. I don't think enough company leaders know this. This is in Stacey's mind and a lot of DEI representatives, minds. But then it becomes company leaders, source of not just opportunity, but a source of, you have to invest not just from the buying aspects of it, but from a workforce and hiring and making sure that your company's culturally kind of authentically representing, or being inclusive of this large community with such a buying and workforce resource power. So it's
Mhm.
just fascinating that, to hear these numbers, and for hopefully any company leader that's listening, I mean, it's so insightful what you're saying, that from a buying power, from workforce, because we're, Latino community is younger in age. It's just very powerful to keep
And
echoing and foot stomping these numbers. I'm
yeah, and
sorry, go ahead.
I should mention that when you look online, you're going to see a lot of different. You'll see, the number I think that many folks have stuck on 1.9, which is what you brought forward. You'll see 2.5 in buying power. You'll see 2.8 in consumer spending. So they're all a little bit different, right? I do want to acknowledge that. So if anyone's out there listening saying, well, hey, I saw 2.5 trillion in, in Adweek, or I read 2.8 in Nielsen, or 1.9 in Pew. Look carefully at the sourcing, because it's all a little bit different. But the overarching point is that it is beyond, our power is beyond, I think, what even we recognize, and it's an opportunity for us as consumers, and we see this happening in a lot of places, to use that power wisely, right? To make decisions around who we spend our dollars with, uh, as it relates to organizations that support our community. And there's a lot of ways they can do that. It's not just through community service or action. It's through sometimes things as simple as brands being present within content that is Latino created or Latino driven, right? That's a proxy for that brand's values, for how they believe, in our community. So there's a lot of ways consumers and people are voting nowadays, right? We used to only vote with our dollars. We can vote with our eyeballs. We can vote, in a lot of ways. And by voting, I mean putting our support behind organizations that are part of our American journey.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I want to pull the thread too, as far as these overarching like community numbers.
Mhm.
It leads to the question of, how do we use this data to empower the Latino community itself, right? You started bringing up some important points, but how do we use the data that you had mentioned?
How do people, yeah, like everyday people, it's, it's interesting. So and some of the work we do is really designed to empower consumers, right? So at Nielsen, we, as I mentioned, we do a lot of work around, um, measuring audiences and content and much more than that, and outcomes. But we also do social and economic research that's designed to empower communities, advocacy groups, academia, and others to better understand the value of this consumer, so that brands and advertisers, of course, direct some of their investing into, reaching this consumer. Um, but but overarchingly, it's to show you that this consumer has, untapped value, perhaps for brands and for others. And if they're looking to grow, this is a great way to do so. But the way that everyday consumers can use our data too, in my opinion, and part of it, one of the wonderful things that has come out of, sort of post COVID, is there was always a lot of advocacy groups, and they've been around for a very long time. Um, you know, uh, really calling for Latinos to be seen, and trying to, organize people around this shared narrative of the value of Latinos. But post COVID and post 2020, we've seen consumers really absorb, uh, they're absorb as a personal narrative, a bit of advocacy in their lifestyles. So advocating for for change, advocating for representation in media, advocating for equity when it comes to, um, contributions or educational journeys for their kids. Like we've seen this conversation of advocacy move to the everyday consumer, to speaking on behalf of your child in sixth grade, in a way that maybe you wouldn't have done the same a few years prior, saying like, hey, there's an equity conversation here around what my child needs, or within the bank, or anywhere within your life. And so and we think that's really important, right? It's not to say that there should be, challenging, but there is a strong conversation around, equity that data can support. And so one of the things we hope to do with our data, for example, our inclusion data, is for consumers to, as I said earlier, understand that how we are seen, in this case, Latinos, Latinx, how we are seen within content influences not only how other people build perceptions around us, right? What they think we are capable of, or what they think we're worthy of. That's very important. And we've heard a lot about that advocacy narrative around stereotyping and whether or not it hurts, our community's opportunities in the world. And we know that to be true, but also think about it this way: how we see ourselves in content and presented within content can also be unintentionally self-limiting, right? Like if we don't see ourselves ever, with the permission to, tell the news, or solve the crime, or be the student that makes it, or whatever, it is in a way sort of, we limit our own subconsciously opportunities based on how we see ourselves within content. So there's this double-edged sword, where not only does it influence what others think we're capable of, and perhaps is connected to things like Latina Equal Pay Day being the very last equal pay day of all women of any race and ethnicity in the country. It's Latinas, the very last. Like, how is that connected to how we're presented in media and what others think we're worthy of? But how also is how we see ourselves in content connected to what we believe we are capable of, what our daughters and our sons are capable of, or our children are capable of. And so, when I think about how consumers can use data, it's about informing ourselves, advocating for ourselves, and better understanding that data today isn't something that is, used only in financial institutions, or in the walls of technology companies. We all use our own data every day. If you're looking at your Instagram post or your TikTok post to see how many people liked it, how many people saw it, what was my reach, data has really moved into a day-to-day conversation for people, and we need to be wise about how we use that data, because it can and it will influence, what we do with our time, where we give our eyes and our dollars. That's a very long answer, Marco.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I really think, and you bring up a good point at the end there, where it is day to day. I think post COVID, you really have to uh, be inclusive, at least from a company perspective, whether it's consumers, business to business, or business to consumer, and really understand the data and what's driving the trends. And what's pretty neat, and again, it goes back to the power, the impressive power of with the GDP, with the buying power, is that we have this community that can set trends, that can set opportunities for these companies to be strategic and make sure that they're tailoring and using your insightful research to kind of forecast and create those opportunities to really target this ongoing growing Latinx community. So very awesome. I I want to kind of circle back with picking off some of your experience,
Okay.
and just kind of giving that personal touch of, the why. At some point, uh, you know, we do a lot of the DEI work, whether it's in my perspective, it's like a more of a night job.
Yeah.
My primary role right now is really on the consulting side, working with delivering IT solutions. But I'm passionate on the DEI side, and I'd love to hear about what makes you passionate about what you do, the data, and how it impacts your own life.
Well, so you brought up something really important there, which is a lot of us do the DE&I work as our side job. And it's interesting because for those of us who it's your primary, it has become our primary role. It started as our side jobs. I mean, they're,
Mhm.
really
Right.
even pre 2020, we've had chief diversity officers and we've been moving in that direction. But what really accelerated it was, post COVID, the murder of George Floyd. I feel like it accelerated the conversation around equity and inclusion for all identity groups, right? Everyone has benefited from that acceleration. And again, that's not to say, organizations haven't been doing it a long time. Nielsen was doing it, has been for a very long time, but it accelerated and created a space for a lot of us to step into these roles as like our primary responsibilities. But even for me, if you're asking like about my history, definitely started as a side job, like accidental. It was like I was the accidental Spanish language market specialist when I was working at an ad agency early in my career, and I loved it. I don't know, it was just such a great time. It was very early in my career. The market was really just gaining momentum, and I had the privilege of buying for Spanish language television and radio in a number of big markets for a number of big clients. And I just loved it. There was no one else that really did it. And so I got to learn and grow with the market a little bit. And the folks that I worked with at that time, many are still in the industry, and we've kind of all grown in our expertise. But it was very much a side gig. And then when I moved from the agency to this company called Arbitron. It had since been acquired by Nielsen, but back in the day, Arbitron did radio ratings. And there, Marco, the same thing unfolded. Like I had my primary responsibilities, but then I was like, well, who is not servicing, because we were definitely servicing all of our clients. I don't want to, imply that we weren't, but like who's really like servicing with this Latino lens, our Spanish language stations, and at the time also like our Black broadcasters, like who is really, thinking about what we have and packaging it specifically for the unique utility that these publishers or broadcasters had, because was very unique at the time. Both Black and Hispanic audiences significantly undervalued, and I'd argue probably still are. So
Mhm.
there was these stations are just working double time for the investment that they deserved, um at a higher rate. And just and so we were trying to figure out, or I was always trying to figure out, like, how do we make that work? And the same thing on the agency side. I was working with agencies that focused on Hispanic audiences and thinking, okay, how do we how do I make this make sense for you? Because the typical menu it didn't meet all of the legacy challenges and that were in place just because you were, working with a diverse audience. And when I say legacy, I mean just, this is not unknown in the advertising and marketing industry, but just these, barriers, these legacy historical barriers for investing. It was a real challenge. And so I did that on the side, and then it ended up becoming, what I did. And thankfully, as my career has unfolded, I've just kept sort of my eyes on that passion, and I've had the chance to bring it into my work. It might be a little bit of lucky timing, honestly, Marco, but um, I, uh, I, I feel like that's, no matter what anyone's primary responsibility is, staying focused on what is where your passion point is, and whether it's trying to figure out how to work DE&I into your day-to-day job, or not even shoehorning it, but seeing where there's a fit somewhere in the work that you do, or whether it's reaching out for those opportunities. You mentioned that you lead, your BRG or your ERG there. And so, that is going to connect you with so many other people on this, sort of shared platform of, visibility and equity.
Wow, what an incredible story. I feel that it wasn't an accident. It was, that quote of fortune, fortune goes to those who are prepared. And it just seemed a great intersection of what you're passionate about. You were prepared, and then the fortunes of the reality. And I'm talking to a SVP, and I just so awesome to have you here and keep and hear, how that passion intersects. Because when you're a little kid, ideally you want to be happy and love what you do. And every time I hear you speak, and this is the first time, the one-on-one session here, I hear the passion every sentence. So,
Oh my gosh,
just
thank you.
thank you for sharing
So
that.
kind.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I didn't know. I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't know I wanted to do this. I just like kept seeing these opportunities for me to do something in this space. And so then I just did those things, and it unfolded. But I can't say, Marco, that I had like a vision. I wasn't like in college and I was like, that's it. This is what and that's a benefit I think that our kids have now is this is a practice. It wasn't even really a practice when I was in school. And it was, and the way that it unfolded, I didn't even mention before I was in advertising and marketing. I worked at a bank, and I found myself in the same way, leaning toward helping, the Latino clients that would come in. They were, oftentimes underbanked and just needed a transactional relationship. But I was like, you shouldn't pay $7.95 for this like there's something we can do here. I know we can figure this out, because there was nonetheless, I found myself gravitating towards supporting um that group of clients. And it was, how our community, it was the best, one of the best and most rewarding jobs I've ever had. And I've had a lot of great jobs, and I'm talking about working at a bank when I was in college. The community just like wrapped their arms around me, and I would have clients come in with my name on a piece of paper, and they would come and get me like I was a teller, and they would come and get me, and they'd be like, this person only wants to speak with you. And they would tell me like, oh, I heard from so and so that you can help me, and like I have these checks I need to cash, and I don't want to pay $7.95, like what can I do? And I was like, I got you. We have a savings account. It's going to cost you nothing. You got, and I would like help them figure out how to bank at that time or become banked, first steps in banking. And it was so rewarding that like the person came in with my name on a little scrap of paper and was like, I have to only speak with Stacie. And I was like, well, es Stacie. And I would say, that's me. And I would show my tag, es Stacie. Soy yo ya. ¿Cómo le puedo ayudar? What do you need? How can I help you? And it was so like empowering too. And then I felt like this responsibility, and I've found that throughout my career unfolding naturally.
That's that that that's fantastic you share that. One of my experiences when I was in college, I had an internship at NCLR, a national National
Council of
Council
La
of La
Raza,
Raza.
now they're Unidos, sí.
Back,
Mhm.
right now,
Very
now
well.
they're Unidos, and I got selected to do a C-SPAN broadcast, and this is just me not knowing enough about enough, but they wanted my opinion on the Hispanic representation within the Washington D.C. Region media, and I'm here just telling it how it is. I don't think we have enough, right? And I feel like the 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 media, and I remember bringing up like, hey, I see, my favorite shows are like The Simpsons and things like that, but there's just not enough in the media or in the newspapers about, people like us in our community. And again, I didn't pick and choose. I just got lucky, fortunate that my cousin was working at the time there, and that's kind of the initial genesis of, wow, like I started understanding that there's a lot of people trying to advocate for our community because it number one, it needs it,
Mhm.
because I see, and this is where what I'm good at is bringing people together regardless of race, kind of United Nations kind of a leader. And I see some of the division within our own Latino culture is the breakdowns of regionalism, countryism, if that's a word, but like, just kind of keeping to your own. But as we move, flash forward years later from my college experience, you brought up the George Floyd murder and how this accelerates, right? So now that accelerates the need of not just DEI, but uh, more of a advocacy for leaders like yourself to bring communities together, especially the Latino community that at times can be divided within its own self, and use those insights, use your passion, use your voice to really inspire, to unify forces with the Black community, Asian, and a
Mhm.
lot of these underrepresented communities, to just create that equity, create that inclusion, because ultimately we want to be heard, we want to be seen, we want to be valued.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
it- it-
I'm oh, please
Go
go ahead.
ahead. No, no, go ahead.
Well,
Go
say
ahead.
I mentioned we all benefited from that. I think oftentimes I hear discussions around like who's getting the opportunities or what's being, and I'm like, this conversation on equity has been elevated for all of us, right? And we know that we have a responsibility here now that this is on the table to be discussed, that we continue to discuss it. Right. This is a journey for, as you said, a lot of identity groups, not the least of which, LGBTQ also very much, under fire specifically now. And so how can we link arms with our brothers and sisters and other communities and advance together?
That's right. That's right. Uh, kind of tying into what we've been talking about, and leaning more into your work, how would you make sure the stories we tell are not biased? How do we achieve respectful and real representation in the narratives
Mhm.
that we create and build?
So I guess it depends on what you mean by stories. If you're talking about like media and entertainment, or
Yeah, more so from the work related of the data science that you're putting out from media and entertainment.
so I would say one of the things we often run up against is the discussion around stereotypes, right? Do I think there's still a place in media and entertainment for crime stories? And, of course I do. Those are great, but I think what we want to do is we'd like to see there, in media and entertainment, be more equity around storytelling, who gets to tell the stories, whose stories get greenlit. So it's as much about who's on screen as it is as creators, right? Creators that are bringing content and, authentically, um, with authentic stories, right, from their personal experiences, or having folks, within the production that are for whom, these stories are meaningful. They can relate. They're, represented. But I do still think there is a place for narratives that are gritty and, of course, right? America loves that. We all love that. But what is the issue today is there is a complete void, for the most part, of other narratives outside of those when it comes to our community. And so what we try and do with the data at Nielsen is link outcomes to, which in this case might be audience viewership, to representation and content. So if we can show that, representation and content brings audiences. It brings audiences of all kinds. It brings Latinos, and qualities of that representation and content and brands that are within that type of content have a higher ROI or sales lift or brand awareness. Then we can show with data, illustrate with data more than just let's have representation. That's good, right? Because that's been the narrative for a while. We're underrepresented. We need to be in content. Okay, that's great. But how can we illustrate that means higher sales? It means better brand awareness. It's better for brands when they're within content that's represented. It means more audiences watching a piece of content. It means more folks coming to a publisher, the first time ever having subscribed or downloaded Hulu and watching it because they came to watch a show that was Latino led or created. So how can we create a data story to prove what we already know to be true? We know inclusive content matters. We know telling our stories in the right way is meaningful, but how do we put a metric on that meaningful so that more content is created, more audiences view the content, more brands advertise within the content, and we create an ecosystem in media and entertainment where there's a real value proposition around inclusion.
Yeah, well said. And in the technology space that I'm in, what we also try to do, very similar to what you just mentioned on the media side, is make sure that there's no narrative or stereotype that there's not enough pipeline talent to be hired for these technical roles, right? And I think it's important to to partner with companies like Nielsen, with We Are All Human, and we're focused more recently with Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. Not recently, but um, uh, we're actively been working with them, but recently just trying to target and make sure that we show up with a presence with our talent acquisition to say this is the pipeline. There's thousands and thousands of represent pipeline of talent to represent the Hispanic community that you can hire from. We're everywhere, and here's kind of some of the funnels that we want to continue. That ongoing bridge of back and forth. So it's the last thing you want to hear is that narrative or that stereotype of, oh, the talent or the bias of what a Latino and what kind of skills they bring to the table. At least that's what I try to generate within my company. I'm sorry,
Right,
go
but
ahead.
no, I was gonna say, but Marco, don't you see that? That's exactly what I think you've nailed it. Is we're talking now about talent and pipeline, and ensuring that there's a lot of talent in the pipeline. I mean, Shippy's like it's packed with people. I've been to some events. There's there was so much talent, but yet we hear on the recruitment side, well, we couldn't find Latinos that are qualified. We don't know where they are. When we know we have the organizations, we know we have the people. So it takes me back to what I said earlier when we first started talking, which is if we're not seen, I don't even know that people outside that are maybe doing the recruiting and working on that and even think about there being an organization like the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. Like, what do they even, because they've never really seen that kind of, representation in anything they've ever even seen casually. What we're underestimating here is the link between how we're seen in content and our ability to be prosperous in the country. We're missing that. We're thinking, no, media and entertainment, they're over there, and we have Gloria Calderon-Kellett, and we have all these, people that are fighting for, and Ava DuVernay that are fighting for representation and content, and that's media and entertainment, and we should be present in, in that, but like we're talking here about HR and talent and growth, but we're missing this connection. Social science tells us that how we are seen and how we see ourselves influences our prosperity. And so I really feel like each of us in the roles that we have, so mine in media and entertainment, yours in engineering or wherever, like we all have our own little piece of this responsibility. If I can change mine, maybe it can influence someone else's ability to be among that top slate of folks that are going to be selected for a role in engineering. And I really do see a connection in that, and that's what I'm trying to build. To at least doing, with what I have control over, or what I shouldn't say have control over, with what I can influence. I can influence this space that I sit in, so I'm going to do that. You have influence over your sphere. We all have influences. You mentioned We Are All Human, the Hispanic star, Claudia Romo Edelman. Amazing. Actually had dinner with Claudia last night. I love her. I love her work. I love how she has brought all of us together, and like, all of this power together around all these different pillars and disciplines, pillars of expertise and disciplines, right? And I feel like that has been long kind of overdue. There has been a lot of uh, you know, um, challenges even within our own community and our own advocacy groups for who's first, who leads, who gets this, who gets that. When what we really need to do is come together and bring our power together. So I think Claudia, we're looking actually at doing some work with We Are All Human around Hispanic sentiment, which we hope to present later this year. And the change in attitudes around what we believe we are capable of, just from the last time they did the work, which I think was in 2019. I think there's been some significant, as I mentioned earlier, sort of ownership of our power in a new way. So looking forward to that, and definitely a partner and a supporter of the orgs you mentioned.
Fantastic. Yeah, great plugs. Though, different, whether that's Pipeline with Ship, with We're All Human Foundation. And I'll also throw a plug for High Tech. For anyone who is in the technical space like I am, High Tech is very valuable. Please do consider them as well for understanding, your Latin audience, but also understanding that the pipeline is massive
Mhm. It's
for
there.
for those who are in tech and strategy. It's there. You just have to be intentional to understand the community, understand those bridges, and really focus on strategically hiring and having, like you said earlier, the lens of representation within whatever pillar or industry it's in, because we're here and we're here to stay. So it's pretty awesome stuff. With a few more minutes that we do have, I do want to lean into kind of a bias question here.
Sure.
More about IBM really plays a big role in technology, and I selfishly want to ask, what role does AI play in the collection and translation of data you analyze?
So I will tell you that I personally analyze. We are doing a lot of work around better understanding how we can use AI. I will say that everyone is and should be. If I could speak in more general terms around the value of AI, I think there is a lot of uncertainty around the utility of AI. For example, when it comes to um, recognition around people perhaps that are, of different race or ethnicity, and how, if or today we do all of that coding manually because we've not yet found a way necessarily to make that work for us in a way that we're fully confident in. But there are so many other utilities and applications, obviously, for AI. And I feel like it is upon all of us to better educate the larger public, because there's some fear still around it too. Uh,
Sure.
I am, and this is maybe a hot take, I don't know. I think AI in general, and some of the new things we've seen around ChatGPT and others is remarkable. It is not going away. And so we're going to need to learn how to be power users and effectively and efficiently utilize AI for, our purposes moving forward. I love that we can process and analyze large volumes of data, extract relevant information quickly, and among the best, gathering and categorizing from so many sources data. So there's a lot of utility. Debugging code, something as simple as just debugging code. I feel like we often overlook those, and people go right to like, well, someone's going to get their homework, like do their homework with AI, or it's going to miscategorize or facial recognition, and I'm like, okay, that's like, there's just this entire other world. And even I admit, that I personally don't have a bunch of experience with AI, but I do know that, in terms of things like predictive analytics, there is so much benefit, and we are definitely exploring internally, how we can use AI.
Definitely. As you said, I think AI is here to stay. I mean, I don't want to say my device's name, but I feel like it's always listening and it's always helping me.
Yeah, I mean, really playing a crucial role in kind of
Yeah.
efficiency. And I think we have to be wise. Of course, there are a lot of risks. Our CEO talked about it recently. We know that there are a lot of risks about how things could be trained and, the guardrails there. But we are, as a world, going to have to work through some of those. And we know that, you're over there leading the way, Marcos. So don't disappoint us, okay?
That's
It's
right. No,
all on you.
it really drives the ethical aspect of it. It has to be intentional with AI development. You have to have that ethical programming best practice and that governance. We talk about security, IT security, and as we as that evolves, equally important if as we get more involved with AI, that ethical aspect to it has to be a standard, has to be very intentional to really like you said, the guardrails have to be put in place, but it's absolutely the wave of the future and the current as well. With one more minute, I do want to plug you and just let the audience know where can people go to learn more about you, and where can people learn more about the data?
Great. Well, I can be found on all socials at Stacie de Armas. It's Stacie. That's another story how I ended up with with that first name. But at Stacie de Armas, lots of I write and publish things on LinkedIn regularly. I also publish there any white papers or pieces of research I do, so you can find them on LinkedIn. Not so active so much in one of the other platforms, but definitely on Instagram, and working on TikTok as well to be a little more active in sharing more content there. But LinkedIn's probably the primary spot. All the work that I publish is related obviously to Nielsen, and you can find us, of course, at Nielsen.com. But at Nielsen's has a DE&I sort of little section within LinkedIn, and that's where you'll find all of the inclusive narratives that we publish. Of course, they'll be on Nielsen's LinkedIn site, maybe perhaps a little more buried, but if you go to the Nielsen DE&I LinkedIn, you can find our any of the public narratives, and in some case, exclusive non-public narratives that we put forward around audiences that are diverse. So Native American, Latino, African American, MENA, Middle Eastern, North African, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus, women. We have a lot of diverse narratives there. And the other place is a simple search on Nielsen.com for any of the identity groups that you're interested in. If you want to learn about, non-binary representation within content, just do a search for that within Nielsen.com, or maybe even in Google, but make sure you add Nielsen to that, and any of the work we've done in that space will be available. Also, feel free to message me on LinkedIn if there's something specific you'd like to chat about. would love to respond and hopefully get you the data and the insights that you need. I should also add, Marco, all the work I've talked about today is available for free. So Nielsen, of course, has a number of clients that pay us for our services, but when it comes to our inclusion narratives, we made the decision to make all of that data, those resources and that research available for free. We publish several major reports each year, and there are a lot of smaller narratives that are available throughout the year outside of the major reports. So please have a look for those.
Plenty of resources, and those who are listening, please utilize them. Thank you so much, Stacie de Armas. We are so awesome to have you as a guest.
Thank you.
We look forward to any future opportunities together, whether it's through We Are All Human or otherwise. Appreciate your time. And yes, as you said earlier, united we can do it. And as our partner says, together we shine. And I truly believe that.
100%. Gracias, Marco. Gracias todos.
All right. Igualmente. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Voces. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels. You can find us as Voces so you don't miss any new episodes.